All right, guys. It's time for some literally just airplanes. And today we're going to talk about the Tupolev Russian Tu-154. It's going to be a good episode, and since last week we got the polls come in, and the pick is in, and it's going to be the Tu-154. Let's do this right now, guys. First things first, I'm going to show you guys, you can give it a listen to one of the most beautiful sounding engines and jets that I've ever heard. It's a beautiful baby, and it's going to be taxi to takeoff. Enjoy. I don't know about you guys, but man, I love that sound. Man, gives you goosebumps every time you hear it. Alright, so let's get started. So, the Tupolev Tu-154, codenamed Careless, which I thought was always funny to hear, is a 3-engine medium-range narrow-body airliner designed in the mid-60s, so around the same time the DC-8 was developed, as previous episode. A workhorse of the Soviet and subsequently Russian airlines for several decades, it carried half of all passengers flown by Aeroflot and its subsidiaries in remaining the standard domestic route airliner of Russia and the former Soviet states until the mid-2000s. It was exported to 17 non-Russian airlines and used as head of state transport by the air forces of several countries. It's quite interesting thinking that the Russians really didn't have that many major jet airliners during the time. In my opinion, a very underrated, very agile looking airplane. I'll have the picture in the description and as the image, but I always wanted to see the differences between its older and rare cousin, the TriStar and the Boeing 727, but it does have a lot of differences. We'll go over those differences later. Of course, the designer was Tupolev. The first flight was October 4th, 1968. And of course, it's introduced on my birthday, February 7th, 1972. No, I was not born in 1972, but it shares the same date of February 7th, 1972. Of course, it was used by the Russian Air Force, and it was used by North Koreans for some time. The aircraft has a cruising speed of about 850 kilometers, so about 530 miles an hour, and a range of 3,280 miles. It was capable of operating from unpaved and gravel airfields with only basic facilities. It was used very, very well in the Arctic conditions as well, and I'm a big fan of Arctic flying aircraft. It was expected to continue to service until 2016, but noise complaints created its downfall and was restricted in many Western Europe and other regions of airports. The development started focusing more on during the Cold War, of course, during the jets. And many times the Russians wanted to find something that can, basically go up against the Trident. But, Wikipedia and some other documents say that it is very similar to the Trident, but I would heavily disagree because it was powered by Russian engines. Yes, the designs might look the same, but an engine can't fly without its engines. I'll go over the workhorse video. If you guys want that will be on Spotify. It will be underneath the description for the previous episodes. And I go more in depth on engines in that one if you guys want to check it out. But not trying to go on a tangent, but this airplane does have its differences. It had a 40,000 pound payload capacity compared to the 37,000 pound of the Trident, and its range was a lot farther. It was very similar to the Trident, but it was marketing the long-range IL-62 for another type. It chose the Tu-154 because it was very well liked by the project chiefs. Sergei Yeager in 1964 and Dmitry Markov in 1975, and the other 1975, Alexander S. Schrenkart, first flew on the 68, but developing a jet like this, they used it to test with airmail first. There was still limited production of the 154 million models, and during that time, it was still using regular dial gauges. The design is powered by 3 rear-mounted low-bypass turbofans, just like the Boeing 727, but it is slightly larger than its American counterpart. Both the 7.2 and the Tu-154 use an S-duct for the middle. The original model was equipped with NK-82 engines, which were replaced with Soloviev D-30 Ku-154s. All Tu-154 aircraft models have a relatively high thrust-to-weight ratio, giving the type excellent performance. Though at the expense of lower fuel efficiency, this became an important factor in later decades. The cockpit is fitted with conventional dual-yoke control columns. Flight control surfaces are hydraulically operated. The cabin of the 154, although of the same 6-abreast seating layout, gives the impression of an oval interior, which a lower ceiling than is common in a Boeing and Airbus. The passenger cabin accommodates 128 passengers in a 2-class layout and 164 passengers in a single-class layout, and up to 180 passengers in high-density layout. The layout can be modified to what is called a winter version, where some seats are taken out and the wardrobe is installed for passenger coats. Like the Tu-134, the Tu-154 was a wing swept back at 35 degrees at the quarter chord line. The British Hawker Siddeley Trident has the same sweepback angle, while the Boeing 7.2 has a slightly smaller sweepback at 32. The wing also has an anhedral sweep, which is a distinguishing feature of Russian low-wing airliners. That's the main difference, guys and gals. The Boeing 727 and the Trident had dihedral sweeps, dihedral upward sweeps. A lot of Russian airplanes, including the Antonov Tu-25, even the Antonov 12, have anhedral. Anhedral meaning downward sweep. I go over anhedral and dihedral in the wing section as well, so if you guys don't understand this, the tutorial will go over it more in depth. The anhedral, though, have poor lateral stability compared to their Western counterparts, but also are more resistant to Dutch roll tendencies. Considerably heavier than its predecessor, Soviet-built airliner Ilyushin IL-18, the 154 was equipped with an oversized landing gear to reduce ground load. The aircraft has 2 6-wheel main bogies fitted with large low-pressure tires that retract in the pods extending from the trailing edges. Soft oleo struts provide a much smoother ride on bumpy airfields than most airliners, which rarely operate on such poor surfaces. The latest variant includes an NVU B3 Doppler navigation system, a triple autopilot, which provides an automatic ILS approach to according to ICAO Category 2 weather minima, an auto throttle, a Doppler drift and speed measure system. A stability and control augmentation system improves handling characteristics. Modern upgrades normally include modernized TCAS, GPS, and other systems. However, the Tu-154's D-30 engines can be fitted with hush kits, along to meet noise regulations. One of my favorite parts, the variants. So each aircraft is going to have variants. Doesn't matter if they only have 1 or 2 variants, they will have variants. The 154 had multiple variants. Many variants of this airliner have been built. Like its counterpart, the 7.2, have been hush-kitted and some converted to freighters. The 154, of course, started in 1970, and its first passenger flight was February 9th, 1972. The 154A had a center section, fuel tanks, and more emergency exits, while engines were upgraded to higher thrust. To discern the A model from the base model, note the spike at the junction of the fin and tail. This is a fat bullet on the A model and a slender spike on the base model. As the original 154 and 154A suffered wing cracks after a few years in service, a version with this new stronger wing designated. The B model had an additional fuselage tank, additional emergency exits, and on the tail. The autopilot was first introduced in this airplane. And with the replacement of the wing, the maximum takeoff weight increased to 212,000 pounds. My most interesting one is the Tu-154 155. A Tu-154 converted into a testbed for alternative fuels. It flew in 1988 and was used until the fall of the Soviet Union. It's then put into storage. There's been many different ideas for it. There's been ideas for a shorter type. There's been ideas for a longer type. But if you look at the longest type one, the Tu-154M and the Tu-154B, they all have an extended reach. In February 2011, all remaining Iranian Tu-154s were grounded after 2 incidents. In October 2020, the last Russian passenger airline to operate this aircraft retired its last remaining one. The remaining operators, as of today, of course, are Air Korea with Air Koryo, Kazakhstan Air Trans, Federal Security Service, and most of the Russian embassies. On 27th December, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that it had grounded all of its 154s until the end of the investigation of the 2016 crash. This was followed by the grounding of all Tu-154s in Russia. The Tu-154 had crashed in the Black Sea just after takeoff from Sochi, Russia on 25 December, killing all 92 people, including 64 members of the official Army Choir of the Russian Armed Forces. Despite having a lot of accidents, many people still like this airplane. Between 1970 and December 2016, there were 110 serious incidents involving the Tu-154, including 73 hull losses with 3,000 fatalities. Of the fatal incidents, 5 resulted from terrorist or military action. On January 11th, 2011, Russia's Federal Transport Oversight Agency advised airlines to stop using the remaining examples of the Tu-154B variant until a fatal fire incident in Surgut had been investigated. On December 27th, 2016, of course, it grounded all of them. There were many accidents, and many of them are listed here. If you want to check them out, the Wikipedia link for the Tu-154 has them all listed. Yes, there are a lot of incidents. As much as all the airplanes had incidents, this one has one of the most. So if you look at most of the airliners, including the Tu-134 and the Tu-124, it is used in many popular culture films. It's been appeared in many Soviet and Russian films, and it's revolving around the exploits of the crew used in the movie Air Crew. As mentioned before, the Kuznetsov NK-82U engines and the Soloviev D-30KU engines were used on it. Both engines were magnificent engines and were used in many different types of aircraft. To end this video, I'm going to show you guys a surprise. I'm going to show you guys the sounding engines of the Tu-154. Enjoy. Man, I love that sound. All right, guys. Well, I just wanted to conclude on that. We're going to be talking about some other cool stuff in the future. My link is to Spotify on my page. Thank you for Anchor. Thank you, Spotify. Thank you, Google Podcasts. Thank you, all the podcasts that are there, if I haven't mentioned it. Thank you to all my listeners that have tuned in. Until next time, fly high, guys, and work on airplanes. Have a good night.